Best and worst case scenarios for all three right defensemen on the New York Rangers. We're taking an in-depth look at Adam Fox, Jacob Trouba, and Braden Schneider on today's episode. All this and much, much more today on Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 881 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And like I just said a second ago, going to go ahead, continue our offseason series of taking a look at every single player who I believe will be on the New York Rangers opening night roster. We're going to take an in-depth look at every single one of those players and discuss the best and worst case scenarios for every single player. And we continue the series. We've already covered the goalies. We've covered the left defenseman. Now we move over to the other side of the ice, to the right defenseman, and we begin with Adam Fox, obviously one of the elite players in this league. Take a quick look at his stats from this past season. He played in all 82 games for the Rangers, all 7 playoff games as well. Scored 12 goals, 60 assists, 72 points. He was also a plus 28, averaged 24 minutes, 23 seconds of ice time per night. Had 25 hits, 125 block shots, 88 takeaways, 74 giveaways. He was an all-star and finished in second place for the Norris. And you could make a case that maybe it should have been his, although, as I discussed in the past, not to rehash this whole thing, but to just offer a couple of quick thoughts about it. Carlson obviously really piled up the points, and it was going to be hard for anybody to beat him. But regardless, just an outstanding season for Adam Fox. What do you expect? And as we do throughout this entire series, going to start with the worst case scenario for Adam Fox and move to best case scenario. Always nice to end on the positives. So worst case scenarios for Adam Fox, and I don't think this section is going to really be all that long. One thing I thought of, though, Game 7 was obviously really rough for the Rangers this past season against the Devils. They lose, 4-0 after playing very, very well in Game 6 to force it to a Game 7. Basically came out, laid an egg in Game 7 against the Devils. And the one thing that really got the Devils going, and granted, the Devils, to this point in the game had already had the better of play, but it was still scoreless. And we were right around like midway through the second period or whatever it was there. Adam Fox, and to be fair, Chris Kreider too. It was the two of them kind of teaming up to make a really big mistake that really hurt the Rangers in this game. Basically, Fox and Kreider were just a mess on this play. It was a 4-on-4, and I think the Rangers got too caught up with, trying to run the clock out on the 4-on-4 so they could get on the power play. Whatever the reason, just a really, really bad play by Fox and Kreider in their own zone. Just very slow, very kind of casual on their own side of the ice here. You had Palat stealing the puck from Adam Fox. Rangers briefly got it back. Kreider starts to skate away, but then Palat steals it back away from Kreider. He goes right around Adam Fox, like Fox is standing still, and pass to McLeod. McLeod scores. It's 1-0 Devils, and the Devils were on their way to a blowout win. So the reason I bring this up, it's not to rehash bad memories or anything like that. Believe me, I want to leave that series in the past just as much as everybody else does. But, that obviously was a big point in that game and kind of a turning point of that game. Again, I know the Devils were playing better, but it was still scoreless. In a worst-case scenario, maybe that play lingers a little bit for Adam Fox. I got to imagine when you have a miscue like that, when you're one of the better players on the rink, of any rink that you ever step on, and you're in a Game 7 and it's winner take all, and the winner moves on and the loser is done, and you have a mistake like that, that has to stick with you at least a little bit into the offseason. Now, I get the feeling that Adam Fox does have a pretty good shoulder, or head on his shoulders rather, and has probably moved past it at a certain point here. But I don't know. I just feel like you make a play like that in a spot like that, that's got to be something of a long offseason for Adam Fox. So in a worst case scenario, maybe that lingers a little bit, but we'll obviously keep our fingers crossed that just motivates him to come back, be better than ever for Adam Fox this upcoming season. I think also in a worst case scenario, if Ryan Lindgren has to miss any time, which again, I do think his injury issues are somewhat overstated by a lot of fans. I'm not going to say he's never been hurt, but people act like, he misses half the season every season. That's just not true. But if Ryan Lindgren does get hurt, we've seen in the past where the Ranger defense starts to come apart a little bit, come unglued a little bit. And I don't think Adam Fox has always been at his absolute best. And granted, when he's at his absolute best, he's the absolute best defenseman in the league. So that's a high standard to hold yourself to. But I do feel like any time where Adam Fox doesn't quite look like Adam Fox, it often coincides with Ryan Lindgren not being in the lineup. We've noticed that over the past couple of years. 2 years ago against the Penguins in the playoffs, when Lindgren had to miss some games, everything fell apart. So if Lindgren goes down in a worst case scenario, maybe that slows Adam Fox down a little bit. He's just not the Adam Fox that we all know and love on the New York Rangers. I would think also in a worst case scenario, the power play. Now, the Ranger power play was very good last season. It just wasn't quite as good as the season before. They dropped from number 4 in the league to number 7 in the league and dropped from 25.2% to 24.1%. It's not like they fell off a cliff or anything like that. It just felt like they were a little bit more inconsistent on the power play this past season. And I think anytime you have a new coach, as the Rangers do, it might take some adjusting and some getting used to a power play system, whatever the case might be. And so, if the Ranger power play struggles out of the starting blocks, it could come down on Adam Fox just because, he is the quarterback out there. But these are all very, very minor concerns. Everything that I just threw out there, it was tough to find much of anything because Adam Fox, when he's at his best defenseman in the world, when he's at his worst, I mean, what is Adam Fox at his worst, really? Like still a top 10 defenseman in the league. So, I'm kind of, I had to search far and wide to come up with some worst case scenarios. But now let's go ahead, get to the fun stuff, the best case scenarios for Adam Fox. I think in a best case scenario, he can give a little bit of a boost to some of the young forwards on the New York Rangers. We've obviously seen Adam Fox rack up just a ton of assists ever since he came into the league. Excellent passer. As I was just talking about the power play, he's a great quarterback on the power play. We're used to seeing him set up guys, like Panarin, Kreider, all the usual suspects. But we want the kids to step up a little bit this season, right? That's what we always talk about. We want to see the kids get, a bigger role, more ice time, more power play time, the whole 9 yards. I think in a best case scenario, Adam Fox can help those young players, the young forwards on the New York Ranger. We talked about his passing. If he can make those kinds of, crisp cross ice passes to whoever it might be, whether it's Lafreniere or Hedl or Kakko, and set them up for some golden opportunities, I think you're going to see an uptick in the production of all those players. And, that's something that it could happen at even strength. It could maybe happen on the power play. We don't know how the Rangers are going to deploy their 2 power play units, how they're going to, share ice time. Is it going to be 50-50 or 60-40 as far as how much they're out there? Are we going to see one of the kid line at least on the top power play unit? That's possible. And if they are, they're out there with Adam Fox, and whichever one of them it is, I think could certainly benefit from playing with Fox. So I think in a best case scenario, Adam Fox can give a boost to, some of the younger forwards on this team, set them up with some golden opportunities with some of those trademark, just awesome passes that he tends to make, throughout the course of the game and throughout the course of really the entire season. And honestly, throughout the entire course of Adam Fox's career so far, and hopefully for many, many seasons going forward as well. Here's one that's a little bit different. I've been talking about the power play a little bit and Adam Fox's role on the power play. I think in a best case scenario, Adam Fox can lead the Eastern Conference in power play assists. Now, I say Eastern Conference because let's go ahead and take Connor McDavid out of the equation. When it comes to offensive numbers, it's kind of tough for just about anybody to beat him at just about anything. So we'll limit this to the Eastern Conference. But when you look at Adam Fox power play numbers from this past season, Fox was number 8 in the NHL last year in power play assists with 28. Now, McDavid led the way with 50. After McDavid, you had Kucherov with 42, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins with 38, Miro Heiskanen, 32, Quinn Hughes, 32, Leon Draisaitl, 30, Brandon Montour, 30. So only 2 of the players that I just mentioned, in that whole top 8 there, only 2 of them in the finish ahead of Fox out of all those players play in the Eastern Conference. And the only one that was significantly ahead of him was Kucherov with 42. So I think it's doable. Rangers have a dangerous power play. There's obviously a lot of weapons out there. And I don't know, again, how they're going to split time on the ice as far as the 2 power play units are concerned. But if we see that Ranger top power play unit get a ton of time, then that gives Fox even more opportunities. And yeah, I think there's absolutely that possibility that he ends up leading, we'll say, just the Eastern Conference in assists on the power play. I think that's definitely within reach for Adam Fox. And if he does that, it bodes well for the Rangers in general. And obviously it bodes well to them having, a top 10, top 7 power play unit for the 3rd consecutive season here. I think also in a best case scenario, he continues to defend the 2-on-1 brilliantly. I've said this before on this podcast. I think Adam Fox, when it comes to odd man rushes and specifically the 2-on-1, he does it just about as well as anybody. Can't even tell you how many times I've seen him back and he's the only guy back. It's a 2-on-1. And whoever they're playing doesn't even get a scoring opportunity out of that 2-on-1 rush because Adam Fox has that good of positioning. Often he'll steal the puck or just prevent a scoring opportunity in general. Just a very high IQ hockey player who understands what he's doing when he's in a situation such as that. I think also in a best case scenario for Adam Fox, he ends up elevating K'Andre Miller if the two of them wind up playing on the same pairing. Now, I've been talking about this a little bit on and off throughout this podcast the last, couple of weeks, months, whatever it's been now. The idea of Adam Fox and K'Andre Miller potentially playing together. Now, part of me wants to see it because I just feel like that could be such a dynamic, just unreal pairing. Part of me wants to see the Rangers, and I think I still lean this way, but part of me still wants to see the Rangers stick with what's been working. Lindgren and Fox obviously click out there together. Miller and Trouba, save for like the first quarter of this past season, have been very, very good together as well. But I do think, if you end up, look, there's 82 games. I think at a certain point, you're going to see Fox and Miller get at least a little bit of run together. And I think, K'Andre Miller on the verge of stardom in this league. He's obviously off to a really nice, start in his career here. Playing with Adam Fox, yeah, that doesn't hurt. And I think Adam Fox is somebody that can get Miller or help get Miller to that next level. I think also in a best case scenario for Adam Fox, he continues to be an elite playoff performer. Fox is one of the driving forces in the Rangers' run to the Eastern Conference Final 2 years ago. He had 5 goals and 18 assists for 23 points in 20 games during that run. And even in last year, ends up with 8 assists in the 7 games in what was, for the most part, a lackluster series for the Rangers. Great start in the first 2 games, and everything basically just fell apart at the seams after that. But Adam Fox, despite the gaffe that he had in Game 7, overall was one of the better Ranger players on the ice throughout that series. And just kind of a fun one to end on here, one that's kind of random. And like I said, just kind of fun and casual here. Can we get a Harvard connection at some point this season? Let's see Adam Fox setting up Jimmy Vesey for a goal, or maybe even vice versa. You never know for sure. I would think the former is probably more likely. But yeah, we've seen the French connection with Blais and Lafreniere. They linked up for a goal, before Blais got hurt the first year that he was here. So why not? Let's see a Harvard connection here. Give me Fox to Vesey for a goal at some point this upcoming season. It's one of those things, maybe it already happened and I just don't remember it. But at some point, let's see Fox and Vesey linking up for a goal. I think that could be a lot of fun. Keep everything rolling in just a second. Going to turn our attention to Jacob Trouba, the Ranger captain, one of the more polarizing Rangers in recent memory. But we're going to go ahead, talk about him and every single best and worst case scenario for the New York Ranger captain. We will do that in just a second. But first, gotta let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Athletic Greens. I started taking AG1 because I wanted a supplement that actually tastes great, and I wanted to see what all the hype was about. Now I've been on it for about 16 months, give or take, and I absolutely love it. I drink it every morning of every day before I do anything, before I record this podcast, before I do anything active, before I do anything for the day job, before I do, parental duties and whatnot. Yeah, I got to have that AG1 first thing every single day, right in the morning before I do pretty much anything else. And AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. AG1 replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple drinkable habit. AG1 helps you build health foundation first. AG1 is raising the standard for quality in the supplement category. Covering my nutritional bases for the day literally could not be any easier, which is why I trust AG1. I just mix one small scoop with water and drink it first thing each morning. Done. I also like that it costs less than $3 a day. Pretty darn good if you ask me. It's a really effective daily habit with high source ingredients. Win-win. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That is drinkag1.com/NHL Network and check it out. All right, we just want to go ahead and thank everybody, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And for the everydayers, you guys are definitely going to want to stick around. We're going to continue going with some of this best and worst case scenarios for every single player on the New York Rangers. Really enjoy doing this every offseason as we build to the next exciting season of New York Ranger hockey. Also, we'll be talking about some prospects in some future episodes and hopefully getting some guests lined up, a couple other crossover episodes as well. But for right now, let's go ahead, continue what we're doing here today and take a look at the New York Ranger captain, Jacob Trouba. This past season, played all 82 games, all 7 playoff games, 8 goals in the regular season, 22 assists. He was a +7, averaged 21 minutes, 12 seconds of ice time, 196 block shots, 218 hits, and 32 takeaways against 49 giveaways. And once again, we'll start with the worst case scenarios, work our way to the best case scenarios. And a worst, I would say the first thing that popped into my head doing this, for Jacob Trouba here, another bad start to the season. I know that some of his struggles and really the struggles of that pairing, himself and K'Andre Miller, were at least somewhat caused by some nagging injuries for Jacob Trouba. But you watch him last year, and I mean, man, he just did not look right. I know that, he's never been a burner out there, but he just looked so slow, looked like he was in quicksand, just having all kinds of problems. And every time that Miller and Trouba were on the ice early in the season, for me at least, I was holding my breath. And the results just were not there early in the season. Now, they eventually, I think Trouba got healthy, and they picked it up and put it back together and ended up having a nice season for themselves. But I think in a worst case scenario, and I think this is especially true when you've got a new coach, the Rangers schedule is somewhat weak early in the season. You want to hit the ground running. You want to get off to an awesome start, which is something that you did not do last season. I think it's all the more important that Trouba not get off to a bad start. And like I said, a worst case scenario, that's exactly what happens. He gets off to a little bit of a slow start for this upcoming season, but we'll see what happens there. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on that pairing, though, given the fact that, once again, they struggled out of the gates last season, Jacob Trouba and K'Andre Miller. I would say also in a worst case scenario, he is one of the, there's no other way to say it. He's one of the slower players on the New York Rangers. And look, that's never really been a huge part of his game, obviously. He does a lot of other things, obviously brings the physicality and the leadership and the snarl and the hard hits and some offensive, game to what he does as well. But there are times where it does seem like when somebody's moving up the ice with like a full head of steam, they are able to kind of get around him. There's times where he'll be back skating, but then I think he kind of realizes like, wow, this guy is about to fly by me. So then he has to turn around and try to keep up with them that way. And there's times where he's not able to do that. And I think, a part of the season where that could really come into play is in the playoffs. We did see a couple of times where guys got by him in playoff games. I mean, I'm not going to say that he was like bad in the playoffs in the last 2 years, but his just inability to move with any kind of speed, I think is one of Trouba's Achilles heels out there. So I think in a worst case scenario, and he is still in his 20s, but I think in a worst case scenario, that becomes even more of an issue going forward. And, guys are just too easily able to just basically blow right by him because, the physicality is great, but if he can't keep up with them, that's not really going to help a whole lot. So I think that's a worst case scenario for Trouba. I think also, in general, I mentioned a bad start for the Rangers is a worst, or a bad start for Trouba is a worst case. I think also in a worst case, just a bad start for the Rangers goes back to everything that I was talking about a minute ago. Jacob Trouba is the captain of this team now, and I think it was a great choice. The players all seem to like it. But if the Rangers get off to a lackluster start this season against some weaker opponents, and especially when you consider how disappointing and how frustrating and how honestly shocking it was to see the Rangers get eliminated in the way that they did this past season, I think a lot of the heat is going to come down on Jacob Trouba just because he is the captain. He does make a lot of money, and that comes with the territory. When you're the captain and you're making big bucks and the team struggles, you're going to be one of the first guy that's kind of in the crosshairs of the Ranger fans. So I think a worst case scenario is just a bad start by the Rangers. And then, of course, Trouba catching, the brunt of that, the brunt of the blame, from the fan base and whatnot. All right, let's move ahead to the best case scenarios for Jacob Trouba. I think in a best case, Jacob Trouba is somebody that can almost kind of take the heat off of some other Ranger players, both from Ranger fans as well as fans of other teams. And we'll start with Ranger fans. Again, I'm not the only Ranger fan that was disappointed, borderline sick by the way that they played after the first 2 games in that playoff series last year. I think in particular games 4, 5, and 7 were basically inexcusable. 5 and 7 even more so. I mean, both shutout losses, and you've got everything right there for you. And you basically just pull a no-show. But there's a lot of Ranger fans that are mad at a lot of different Ranger players. And, obviously Trouba is somebody that's always been kind of a target of Ranger fans when things aren't going well. Another one, and this is going to be even more true after you watch the playoff series last year, is Artemi Panarin. I feel like, though, Jacob Trouba, he's somebody that can kind of take the brunt of the heat. He's somebody that can handle it. Whereas, other guys, other young players, you don't want to see something happen where like Alexis Lafreniere is being booed every time he touches the puck, or Capo Caco, whatever it might be. I don't think that would happen. But again, I just feel like a lot of the Rangers fans, like the collective ire, it tends to go toward Jacob Trouba. And in a way, whether he even realizes he's doing it or not, and I'm sure he would if he could consciously do this. But I think in a way, he's almost kind of shielding some of those other players from, maybe some of the ire of New York Ranger fans. As far as other fan bases are concerned, the Penguins fans, that they're the ones that spring into mind right away. But I feel like other fan bases, they're so obsessed with Jacob Trouba and they want to boo him that it kind of takes the heat off of some other players. You don't see too many Ranger players go on the road and really face that difficult of an environment. You don't see like, Panarin being booed every time he touches the puck, or like Mika Zibanejad. I mean, Panarin, he'll get booed when he goes back to Columbus because obviously he left there. Jacob Trouba, he'll always get booed in Winnipeg. Flames fans will always boo Adam Fox. Canadians fans do not like Chris Kreider. I think we know that. But, for the most part, the guy that hears it from opposing fan bases and the guy that is really, really disliked on the Rangers by opposing fan bases is Jacob Trouba. And once again, I think he's kind of, shielding some of the other players from some of that, whatever the opposite of hospitality is from opposing fan bases. So, yeah, I think that's something where, in a best case, once again, he just kind of, he absorbs the brunt of, whatever it might be from fans, whether it's the Ranger fans or other fans. I think also in a best case scenario, we can see Jacob Trouba set a new career high in block shots and hits. He did it this past season. Career high 196 block shots, career high 218 hits. We talk about on this podcast different Rangers being, kind of polarizing amongst the fan base. I think Ryan Strome was a good example of that. I think for sure Jacob Trouba. Artemi Panarin might be heading toward that territory, although I think most Ranger fans certainly still do like him. But somebody that I think, and Patrick Kane's another one, but Jacob Trouba more so than anybody, I feel like he's somebody that really kind of splits the fan base. There's people that love the old school snarl and everything, and there's other people that look at him and they say $8.5 million for what exactly? They feel like he's a little bit overpaid. But one thing that every single Ranger fan I feel like must absolutely agree on, even if you're somebody that's not a Trouba fan, you don't get it, you think he's overpaid, you want somebody else for captain, whatever the case might be, the one thing that I think every single Ranger fan has to agree on and has to give to Jacob Trouba, the dude is tough as nails. And obviously we see many, many examples of that when you go through the entire season. He's always very accountable after games, and he goes out there and he grinds and he works hard every single night. He's battling for the puck on every single shift. If somebody has their head down, he is going to absolutely whack them. And he does kind of toe the line a little bit as far as, what's acceptable and what's not. But I do think for the most part, and especially last year, the vast majority of Jacob Trouba hits, vicious though they might be, 100% clean. There are times where, maybe he's towing the line or maybe even going just a little bit over the line. That has happened at times throughout Jacob Trouba's career. But when he whacks people, you think about that Flames game last season, everything he did in that game was 100% clean. It was shoulder to chest, taking the body, knocking the guy to the ice. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think in a best case scenario, he, again, to kind of bring it back to what we were originally talking about, block shots and hits, he can set a new career high in both, but also just bring that toughness and be that tone setter for the New York Rangers, throughout this upcoming season. I think also in a best case for Jacob Trouba, I could see him being like a solid kind of go-between as far as Laviolette and the players are concerned, because we've been wondering how Laviolette is going to mesh with this Ranger team. Laviolette's a pretty high-intensity coach and a lot of fire and brimstone. That's kind of the phrase that a lot of people have been using. And then you've got players in the Rangers, the leadership group that, they lead in their own way. And I don't think there's like a leadership issue on this team at all, but they're not really the biggest rah-rah, screaming and yelling kind of players. You think of guys like Kreider, Mika, Panarin, whoever it might be, even Goodrow. Goodrow plays with a lot of intensity. He will at times be vocal, but you look at Jacob Trouba, he's kind of the go-between because he's obviously very intense. And I just feel like Jacob Trouba, as the captain of a Peter Laviolette team, that just makes all the sense in the world. And something I talked about in the past, even if the Rangers had just completed this past season without a captain, I just get the feeling that Peter Laviolette would step in, and if you told him to name a captain, Jacob Trouba would probably be his guy. And I just think it's a really nice match, for the Rangers, Trouba and Laviolette going forward. I think also in a best case scenario, he continues to hold the team accountable. We talked about the helmet throw last year. They were playing like absolute garbage against the Blackhawks. Everybody skating like they got a piano on their back. And he got into a fight and ended up taking off his helmet and firing it against the boards, trying to wake everybody up a little bit. They went on a winning streak right after that. And you watch his post-game press conferences. he'll answer every question. He'll stay on there all night if he has to, and very accountable both for himself and for the team in general. So in a best case scenario, he keeps everything on the rails this upcoming season. And once again, one of the more accountable players and just a big time leader for the New York Rangers. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. One more defenseman to talk about, and then in a future episode, we're going to turn our attention to the Ranger forwards. But we got one more defenseman who I believe will be out there on opening night, and that is Braden Schneider, and we will talk about him in just a second. All right, so Braden Schneider, 81 games this past season, 5 goals, 13 assists, 18 points. He was a +9, 130 block shots, 147 hits. Now, worst case scenario, and this is another one where it's kind of tough because I think, you look at Braden Schneider and you're probably feeling pretty good about what he's done so far, just a year and a half into the NHL, his NHL career, which is kind of hard to believe. I guess in a worst case scenario, though, he could plateau a little bit. The book on him going into the draft that year was, of all the players available, this guy is among the safest picks you could make in the entire draft. That's what the scouts seemed to agree on, was that Braden Schneider, there were some players in that draft that maybe had more upside than Braden Schneider, could go on to be absolute megastars, whereas Schneider wasn't really looked at that way. But somebody that, from what I was reading, there's no way that this guy is not going to become like a solid, regular NHL defenseman at the very least. Maybe not as high of a ceiling as others, but a very, very safe floor. So that leads me to believe that in a worst case scenario, Braden Schneider maybe plateaus a little bit. And honestly, if he kind of just stays where he's at right now, I mean, he's still a solid NHL defenseman. There's nothing wrong with really anything Braden Schneider does out there. But, I think right now he's 21 years old and we're all like geared up for, oh my God, Braden Schneider could become a superstar. He could be this, he could be that. And I am very hopeful and very bullish on Braden Schneider's future. But I guess in a worst case scenario, we kind of just get what we're getting right now from Braden Schneider going forward. And again, he would still be a solid player, but maybe we're at the point where, he's not going to get exponentially better than where he's at right now. I would say also in a worst case scenario, and we're actually going to talk about this in the best case scenario as well. That'll make sense in a second. But in a worst case scenario, they brought in Erik Gustafsson, and it looks like he's going to be the 6th defenseman, and he'll be out there with Braden Schneider on opening night. So I guess in the worst case scenario, Braden Schneider just does not have chemistry with Erik Gustafsson. Gustafsson's had kind of a weird career arc. He plays well, and then he falls off, and then he plays well again, and then he falls off again, and then he's on a PTO, and then he's with Laviolette with the Caps, and he's playing on the power play unit. So he's been all over the place, up and down throughout his entire career. With Erik Gustafsson, you never know for sure what you're going to get, and I think a pairing like that, a veteran in Gustafsson, who I believe is 31, and a young guy in Schneider, who's 21. We'll see. We'll see how they shake out. But in a worst case scenario, you never know for sure how any 2 defensemen or any 3 forwards are going to click. You put them out there together. So in a worst case scenario, just doesn't have the chemistry with Erik Gustafsson. But in a best case scenario for Braden Schneider, so this one, anybody watching on YouTube, there's a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of a spoiler there, if you will, on the right bar. What it says is Braden, and then you've got the colon, and it says best third pair D-man in the NHL. And at first, you might hear that and think like, well, it's kind of early. He's only a year and a half into his career. He's maybe not that guy just yet. But honestly, like off the top of your head, and this is without going through the other 31 teams and looking at every depth chart, et cetera, et cetera. But off the top of your head, can you name me a third pair defenseman in this league who is like head and shoulders significantly better than Braden Schneider? Off the top of my head, I really can't. And again, maybe if I went through the depth chart, I'd see a guy or two that, I'd put ahead of Schneider, but that player honestly might not exist. And, if you include upside and the fact that he's only been in the league for a year and a half, I think what I said about Braden Schneider becomes even more true. This is somebody that is probably ready to be a top 4, defenseman, but they just don't have room for him there because he got Fox and Trouba ahead of him. So he's probably going to stay on the third pairing. But what a luxury. I mean, a guy that could clearly be in a top 4 role is your third pair defenseman. And like I said, show me anybody that you believe is significantly better than Braden Schneider. Obviously, Schneider being on the third pairing gives them a lot of depth. And he's somebody that if they at a certain point need him to move into a top 4 role, I think he's more than ready for it. So that's pretty awesome. And, again, one of the absolute best third pair D-men in this league. I think also in a best case scenario for Braden Schneider, he continues to be something of a chameleon. I mentioned a minute ago the whole thing with Gustafsson, and in a worst case scenario, they wouldn't have chemistry. But I don't really have any reason to believe that they wouldn't, and that's because Braden Schneider, since coming into the league, he has played with just about everybody that's played on the Rangers. It feels that way. you look at all the different defensemen he's played with, and keep in mind, again, just a season and a half worth of hockey, I believe like 124 games for Braden Schneider. He has spent, fairly significant time with all of the following. You got Patrick Nemeth, which, I mean, that's a heck of a way to start your career. Libor Hayek, Justin Braun, Zach Jones, Ben Harper, and Nico Mikkola. And now he's going to end up with Eric Gustafsson. So that's 7 different defensemen that Schneider would have spent regular time with since he came into the league just a season and a half ago. And honestly, any defenseman at all that does that, it's impressive. Adam Fox could do that, and it's impressive. Or Jacob Trouba, or whoever you want to go to. You go around the league to these other guys. Cale Makar doing that would be impressive. The fact that Braden Schneider has done this at the age of 20 and 21, had this revolving door of defensemen around him, and seems to work well with every single one of them. And think about the diversity of that group I just mentioned. We got young guys. We got old guys. We've got trade deadline rentals. We've got homegrown prospects for the Rangers, guys that the Rangers drafted. We've got stay-at-home defensemen. We've got offensive defensemen. He's literally played with every kind of defenseman that you could possibly imagine playing with, and he's only, again, a year and a half into his career. So I think in a best-case scenario, he continues to be a chameleon. Obviously, I think it'll be him and Karlsson to start the season, but if the Rangers want to, switch their defense pairings, and he's got to be out there with, Lindgren or Miller, or maybe Zach Jones works his way back into the mix. Maybe Matthew Robertson eventually gets a chance. In a best-case scenario, he can continue to be that guy, the guy that can go out there and play good hockey with anybody that he's paired with. And again, the fact that he's only 21 and doing all that, extremely impressive. I think also in a best-case scenario, we might see Braden Schneider mix in on the penalty kill a little bit more. The Rangers, for the PK last year and even the year before that, I don't really remember seeing Schneider out there a ton. I mean, I'm sure he got out there from time to time, but I think, the coaching staff, Gallant and the rest of the Ranger coaches at the time, they were more trusting of, the veteran defensemen, Fox and Lindgren and Miller and Trouba, and with good reason, because those are guys that are obviously very good players, and you're shorthanded. You want to make sure that you don't give up a goal or do everything you can to prevent giving up a goal. So, yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to get those guys on the ice, but I think in a best-case scenario, maybe Schneider earns a little bit more trust, gets a little bit more time on the PK, and in a situation like that, maybe Adam Fox gets a little bit less time on the PK, and you can give him more even strength time, more power play time, whatever it might be. Adam Fox just puts up a crazy amount of minutes. It feels like pretty much every night, and that could be a way to, I don't know, keep Fox fresh for other situations in the game if you feel like you can trust Braden Schneider when it comes to the penalty kill. I think also in a best-case scenario for Braden Schneider, he keeps a really good mindset. I can remember around this time last year, going into this past season, Braden Schneider said, he's not taking anything for granted. He doesn't think he's on this roster. He feels like he has to go out there and earn his spot all over again. I think that's just an awesome attitude to have. And, Braden Schneider seemed to be the only one of us who wasn't basically penciling him in to last night's opening night roster, because the season before that, he was caught up, played very well. Obviously, was a big part of the Ranger playoff run as well. He was out there for every game. And so he didn't take anything for granted, though. And I think all of us assumed he would be on the opening night roster. The fact that he didn't, I love that. I love the fact that he feels like he's got to go back out there and earn it every single season. And I get the feeling that, he's probably taking a similar mindset into this upcoming season, even though at this point, I mean, to go with, somebody over Braden Schneider on the opening night roster, I just don't see why that would make any sense or why they would even consider doing that. I mean, he's somebody that you can pretty much just pencil in, and he's going to be the guy there on that third pairing, you would have to think. I mean, I can't even imagine why he wouldn't be. But it is a great mindset to have, that he's got to go out there and battle and earn it every single season. I figure we could pretty much call it there for today. We are going to eventually move ahead with the forwards, the best and worst case scenario for all the Ranger forwards. I did just want to mention at the end here, though, Derek Stepan stories from when he scored Game 7 in overtime against the Washington Capitals. If you have a story of who you were with and what you were doing and how you reacted when Stepan scored that goal, definitely email it to me or DM it to me on Twitter. And just let me know, and we will share that on a future episode of Locked On New York Rangers. The Fantasy League, for everybody that played last year, if I haven't heard back from you, you've got 2 weeks. We're going to set the deadline at Monday, August 21st. After that, if I haven't heard back from you and you played last year, we're probably going to give your spot to somebody new this year. There's some people that are waiting in line, hoping to get in, and definitely looking forward to some fantasy hockey this season. But yes, if you played last year and I did not hear from you, you got 2 weeks starting right now. Also, one last little bit of news here, a tweet from Molly Walker. We can talk about this real quick before we call it a day, and then talk about it in greater detail in a future episode. But this is what Molly Walker tweeted out a little bit earlier today. Rangers have hired Christian Hamura as a skills and performance development coach. He will be on the coaching staff and around the team regularly. Mark Ciaccio is still with the organization, but in a new role as a prospect development skills coach. And yeah, Ciaccio is somebody that doesn't get a ton of attention, but he's starting to get a little bit more attention from Ranger fans the last year or two here, and not in a good way, because I think a lot of Ranger fans kind of blame him or look at him as at least part of the reason why all these high draft picks for the Rangers just don't tend to work out, and they just don't get to the level that we expect. Obviously, Lafreniere and Kako, the book's still out on them, but you look at Anderson, Kravtsov, they were disasters. And then the Rangers have been very hit or miss in the draft, and I feel like the overall thought is that Ciaccio just has not done a good enough job in his role. And it sounds like now he's going to have a hand in prospect development, and Christian Hamura going to be on as a skills and performance development coach. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about Hamura, who he is, and what he brings to the table in a future episode of Locked On New York Rangers. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.